Hi, everybody. David Klein, CEO, co-founder of CommonBond. As just mentioned, CommonBond looks to lower the cost of higher education in the US. In the US, student debt is a big issue, $1.5 trillion outstanding, held by 44 million people in our country. Our job, our mission, is to lower the cost of that debt and to reduce that debt as soon as possible for as many of those 44 million people in the US as possible. We do that in a couple different ways. One, we provide low-cost student debt for students going to school. Two, we provide low-cost student debt for those who've graduated and want to refinance their debt in a lower-cost product. And three, we have SaaS-based technology that we sell to companies as a way to help them help their employees reduce their student debt, pay it down faster and cheaper. That's a little bit on us. A couple quick hits. We've done about $2.5 billion in student loans to date. We've also signed about 250 corporate clients on the SaaS technology side of our business. That's a little bit on us, the company, a little bit on me, and then I'll get right into the content of today. And I said just a little bit on me. Number one, I come from a family of entrepreneurs. From the moment I was very little, I knew I wanted to start a company, and run it forever. Two, I spent about 10 years in corporate America. I thought this would be an opportunity for me to learn a lot of good things, meet some really bright people, and then take that on my way to build a company of scale one day. Ended up working at places like McKinsey and American Express. And then thirdly, when it was time for me to go back to business school myself and pay my way 100% with student loans, that's when I stumbled upon the personal pain of what it's like to take on costly debt to pay for school. So I ended up taking that personal pain, my background in finance, and my entrepreneurial ambitions, putting it together and dedicating myself to CommonBond. When Web Summit asked me to come and speak today and talk about at least one learning in my experience so far, it was clear to me that the learning was going to be all about scale. And that's what I believe is behind me, yes. So scale is really, for me, one of the biggest learnings that I've had in my role. And scale, I think, ultimately comes down to three things. I'm going to fly right through them, and then I'll come back and say a few words. Number one, capital. Number two, culture. And number three, customer. So from a capital perspective, that's pretty straightforward. It's making sure that we've raised enough capital to keep the lights on as we continue to grow, regardless of growth trajectory over time. Culture is where I'm really going to focus because I do believe this is a foundational element and one of the least understood elements of scale. And customer is all about making sure that you have a company and a model that meets an unmet customer need, that allows you to serve that customer need as well as the company and its shareholders over time. So let me take the deep dive on culture. And first, let me set the stage. Many of you, I'm sure, are here dealing with struggling the same issues. You've been out in market for a while. You've reached product market fit. You've raised a series of rounds. Now what? The only constant is change. Your customer preferences change. The market might change. Your own organization might change. How do you deal with that in a world where, at scale, needing to reach growth and profitability sustainably over time is the key objective? To me, as I mentioned before, the foundational element is culture. Culture is all about ensuring that you have an environment where you have a highly talented group of people who remain constantly engaged and effective for what it is that we're looking to do in a sea of constant change to make the company grow and profitable. A couple of the learnings that I've made along the way, as I thought about culture more and more and more, what I realized is that you have a good one when the right decision is being made, no matter who's in the room. And this is important, especially as a founder who's very active. You're in the room a lot in the early days. You can ensure that the right decisions are being made and are based on the right set of criteria, but as you grow and as you scale, you can't possibly be in the room for every single consequential decision. And so it's absolutely critical that you set an environment, you set a culture where the right decision's being made, even if you aren't in the room. And as I sat back and I thought, well, what is it? What's the foundational element of culture, which in and itself is foundational to scale? And to me, the answer is values. And it might sound hokey, although in a room mostly of founders, it probably sounds a lot less hokey to all of you than it does non-founders. Because values at the end of the day, in my opinion and my experience, really are the criteria we all use to make a decision that's consistent with who we are, to make a decision that's consistent to what we believe will yield the most growth and profitability over time. And so once I discovered that values was a foundational element of culture, I did a few things. First, I did a self-assessment. How good were we as a company as relates to not just culture, but specifically values? And I realized we had a problem. The problem was I was the only one in the company that could recite to you all the values we had. And at that point, I realized, okay, my year is going to be dedicated, in part, one of my 3 priorities, dedicated towards ensuring that values at CommonBond, the values that we have at CommonBond, are not just known by everybody what they are, but also what they mean and how to live them. Again, knowing what the values are, knowing what they mean, and knowing how to live them. So I'm going to offer up a few of the things that I did in that year that ended up being pretty successful, to the extent sharing those with you help in the day-to-day, in the operations that you run. The first thing I did, the first email I sent to everybody in the new year was all about values. It was an opportunity for me to list out all values that we have. We have 10, by the way. And not only say what they were, but also communicate to the team what they meant to me personally and why they were important organizationally. That was number 1. Number 2, and in that email that I sent to the entire company, I introduced some governance around values to ensure that values became more of a part of how we thought and talked as an organization day to day. And what I suggested and what I said I would start doing, and I did start doing, was in my one-on-ones with every single one of my direct reports, every week, they could come to me and talk about whatever they want so long as one thing was on the agenda as a standing agenda item. And that one thing was values. Specifically, we were going to choose one value per week, go through our 10 values and repeat over and over and over again. And that week, it was incumbent upon every single one of my direct reports to give me an example of when they saw that week's value on display, to give me names of people, names of teams, of when it was working. The third thing I did is I told the company, my leadership team, that every week during our leadership team meeting, which happens once a week for 2 hours, I was going to have a standing agenda item added to that meeting as well, and that was values. And at the end of the meeting, every meeting, I would tap one of my direct reports to tell a story that I thought was most compelling that they told me about the value on display for that particular week, as a way for everyone to see that I took it personally, that we were going to continually talk about this on a weekly basis, and to give other leaders an opportunity to share with others what they shared with me. The fourth thing is every Friday during Q&A, question and answer session with my team, which I do every Friday. My company can ask any question they want. They know they'll get an answer. In my answers, I incorporate the values as much as I can in number and in type to reiterate and repeat what they are, what they mean, and how to live them. Finally, what I do is lead by example on living the values. To live values, I believe that they're lived mostly through 3 things. 1, hiring. 2, firing. 3, promoting. And so we spend a significant amount of time hiring and recruiting new talent, but making sure the process is right and making sure that we're talking about it and calibrating appropriately with every new finalist candidate that we get. On the firing side, one of the most important and one of the most difficult decisions, not necessarily you have to make as a founder, but absolutely that your leadership team has to make. We all want to be nice people. We want to see ourselves as nice people. And so there's a little bit of cognitive dissonance that goes around when you have to tell somebody they don't have a job anymore. but it's absolutely required to do if you want to grow and scale over time. And that's where I think leading by example is among the most important places to lead. If your leaders see that you are able to do it, you can do it, and you do it well, because there's a good way to do it and a bad way to do it, then they are more likely to do that themselves. And finally, on promotion, what I would say, we spend a significant amount of time calibrating people throughout our entire organization. We spend a lot of time person by person before making a promotion decision. We will spend over an hour on one individual sometimes to talk about promotion if it needs that much calibration. I believe it's some of the best time we spend because it's time that we as a leadership team get to align on one of the key ways that we live our values, which is promote. So again, working back up, 3 of the ways to live the values: hire, fire, promote. Values, generally speaking, a foundational element to culture. Culture being a foundational element alongside capital and customer to ensure that you scale as an organization. They didn't give us a lot of time. There's a lot to talk about. I'll leave it there. My time's up. Thank you very much.